Hi, and welcome back to the Mind of the Writer. So, as I said last week, we're about to embark on some steps of research as I begin to work toward my theories on romantic obsession and writing love stories and doing all of that stuff. And I definitely have a conflict of interest with this one because I've always loved love stories and I certainly love writing them. And in my serial novel, there are a couple of really big love stories. So of all the videos, this is probably going to be the shortest video and the most simplest. But we're going to be talking about Hiraeth. So as I said last week, Hiraeth is the homesickness for one's homeland once the person has left the homeland, but it is more than just homesickness. It is really infused with feelings of nostalgia, and the words I associate with it would be pang and ache and longing, and there's a real tear in the eye over this. There's almost like a physical yearning to be with that homeland, and you're not there. The other thing with Hiraeth that I feel is very important is that with that longing comes the development of the place, or the development of the place in the imagination and in the mind. And so what you are missing isn't the country as it actually is, it's the country that you've built up in your mind. And when I was reading on Hiraeth, not recently, but in years past, there was this comment that as soon as you return to your homeland and you set foot on your homeland, that feeling just completely disappears. So for this video, in order to talk about that, I have to talk about my own experience with Hiraeth. So I left England when I was 8, so I was very young, but I had a very idyllic relationship with my paternal grandparents in England, and I returned to England until I was 32, and on those trips, at least throughout my adolescence, I traveled a lot with my grandparents all over England, and so England for me was very, very positive. But I didn't return for 16 years after my grandmother died. My father was an only child, and so we didn't have too much family over there to stay with. I had lots of family obligations here in Canada, various health things going on, and I wasn't able to return. And in those 16 years, my missing of England was huge, just huge. And it really was that sort of lump in the throat, ache in the chest, tear in the eye. And I romanticized it in my head. So when it came time to working on my serial novel, I set my novel in England, but not in England as England is, very much in keeping with this whole Hiraeth thing, but I set it in the England in my head. And because England is in my imagination, it was a really easy place to write about because I was writing what was in my mind, and everything from the past in my mind was so much bigger and so much more powerful, and I think I was able to turn that into a story. And so the England and the Girl on Harlow Street does have this mythical storybook quality to it, because what you're getting is my Hiraeth manifested on the page. I think the interesting thing with Hiraeth is, when you're building these things up in your mind and you're aching, you're longing for it, is that things do become bigger in your mind. And I know for me that when I was away from England, when I was in Canada, my grandparents' house in my mind was huge. It was a really, really big house. But then when I'd actually arrive in Northampton and I'd go into the house, I would be like, wow, this house is actually quite small. And so I think it's the same when you're working from your imagination. So when I was working on my novel, the house, which I used my grandparents' house as sort of the inspiration, the muse, I could say, the building muse for the house in the story, it was big. It was really, really big in my head. But when you look at the real house, it's actually not all that big. So for me, the important element of Hiraeth is longing. And as we move forward, I'm going to look at how longing for a place can parallel longing for a person, how longing for a place and longing for a person then becomes the bed created for desire in order to desire. And do authors need desire to write those love stories, to write those big plots? And so I think that Hiraeth, in a way, is a really good place to begin, because if we can think of a person missing something and building it up in their imagination, and then when they actually have that thing in reality, the Hiraeth goes away, I think that's a really good baseline to use when it comes to looking at limerence and limerent objects, and then muses, and is it possible to physically have a relationship with a muse for a long time, or is it just like Hiraeth, when you have that relationship, does it sort of all go away? I don't know the answers to these questions. This is what I want to find out. So I'm not telling you one way or the other, but this is the journey that we're going to embark on. But Hiraeth is a really, really good place to start, because it is that separation from something that you long for. And then when you have it, then that longing goes away, and Hiraeth no longer sort of has you in its clutches. So thanks for watching, and then next week we will talk about limerence and limerent objects. Okay, see you next week.